I'm sure we can relate to the patient that kind of comes in and is always talking about the difficulties in the world, the negativity and the terrible things that are going on. And you find yourself kind of being the therapist that is kind of flying the flag of hope. And you start getting into this, to and fro of yes, but, yes, but, yes, but with the patient, trying to convince them that optimism or hope is actually possible. This is the negativity pessimism schema. I'm Rita Younan.
I'm Ruth Holt. Welcome to 7 Minute Schemas. Today we're talking about a schema that can be really challenging as we work our way through a series on each of the 18 maladaptive schemas that Jeff Young has brought to our attention and others in schema therapy. So yeah, negativity pessimism schema, it can be really challenging, I think, for people to work with, for therapists to work with. We're naturally hopeful people. We think change is possible, but often these clients don't feel that change is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it's not just their thoughts about change or about good things happening. They often will hold their schema in their body, in their memories, in their emotions. I have one lady, let's call her Sally, who she doesn't need to speak a word, but her schema walks her into the room. So as she walks into therapy, she kind of sits down, slumped in the chair, big sigh. That's how she used to start the sessions that we had. And so it already felt like a big wet blanket.
Mm-hmm.
Is that been your experience, Rita, with working with clients with this schema?
Yeah, and sometimes it might manifest itself physically, like this particular patient that you're describing, and other times it just might be verbal, constant frustrations, or rationalizations about the negativity and the worst possible thing happening, and therefore not having to change. It's pretty much rationalizing staying stuck, and then you find yourself in this really kind of frustrated, hopeless, negative, what's the point experience as a practitioner. That's kind of how I've noticed it in the room as well.
Yeah, Jeff Young talks about how it can really manifest in 4 different ways. He says it can come about, and present itself in a chronic worry, that ruminative sort of worry focus, negative focus, a vigilance to problems, and that's where you get your yeah buts. They might be with you, and then their brain clicks over into, well, how will that not work? So a vigilance, chronic worry, complaining, and that can, I think people with this schema can be in therapy for years because they're talking about their problem, but they're really talking about it, as you were saying, in that more detached, complaining, protector way. So it's the content of therapy is there, but the affect is not there. The vulnerable part that holds the distress is not really getting a look in, even though there might be a lot of tears or talking about a problem. The fourth way Jeff Young suggests that this schema presents itself is in chronic indecision. So, and that makes sense, doesn't it? If you're not actually authentically connected to who you are, but rather connected to the problems that might befall you, it's very hard to have the confidence to make decisions.
Because every decision will essentially have a negative outcome. So I'm just going to kind of be frozen in not making a decision, and so negativity pessimism is going to fuel a lot of those chronic axis 1 disorders, and depression for that matter, in terms of generalized anxiety, panic disorder, things going bad. I certainly had patients that have a strong negativity pessimism schema around fears of flying, or going into a restaurant and eating something and becoming really sick. So you can see how it can manifest itself in all different ways clinically.
Yeah. And I guess one of the key things we're then trying to work through with our clients is, where did these things come from? Where did this schema come from? And, there's 2 main ways that this schema can come about. It can come about from really being stuck growing up in a situation that was not changing, a situation where there was chronic mental unwellness or chronic alcohol abuse, poverty, all sorts of things that really were never going to change. And here it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If you're a little person growing up in that kind of house, it actually isn't very adaptive to wake up every day and think to yourself, maybe today's the day that dad's going to give up drinking. Maybe today's the day that all our problems will be gone. That's not adaptive. So it actually makes sense to kind of go, well, it's not going to happen. That good things are not going to happen to me. And so there's that kind of learning in the early environment. And that's really important for us to identify with our clients, because that gives us lots of opportunity to reframe their experience, not as the truth about the world, but the truth about their early childhood experiences. So they can be learnt, or they can also be modeled. You know, there can be a parent who is chronically depressed or chronically pessimistic, and that's the modeling that's happened for our clients. And that then gives us some really lovely targets for intervention, doesn't it? We can do some imagery rescripting, we can confront that pessimistic parent, we can really challenge them about the cost of handing on that way of thinking about the world to their child.
Yeah, so what you're saying, Ruth, is that on the one hand, it's quite protective in order to think that way. It's best to be hopeless rather than be hopeful, and then be made to feel hopeless as a result of being hopeful. And I guess the other side of it is that kind of selective internalization, and the implications for therapy is to model being hopeful and not hopeless. Like sometimes that's the actual target for therapy. How do you model being hopeful?
Yeah. And I think you can do some really lovely behavioural interventions in terms of, you know, some response prevention work for worrying. So catching that worrying and kind of shifting attention, or even reducing complaining behaviour. If there's people in people's lives that really facilitate, you know, that complaining, how's your back? Tell me more. You know, if their relationships are kind of connected by complaining, then that's going to reinforce the schema. So we want to really limit some of that behaviour as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's our 7 minutes, Rita.
Jesus.
For those of you who would like to find out more, to develop your schema therapy skills more, there's some online courses that are available in the links at the end of this.